Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is parallel in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 1, Prologue. The battlefield smelled acrid with death and smoke. The tangy taste of chakra hung in the air. It prickled at the skin like static, sending the hair on their arms on end. Everyone on the battlefield was haggard, chakra tapped out and bleeding out. The entire allied shinobi nations were dying, or already dead. Whatever jutsu Kaguya used was calling forth meteors that ripped the ground apart. The only shinobi left to fight were Kakashi, Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto. Kakashi had deep gashes and an X on his chest. Sakura's face and arms were cut up, her left hand dislocated with torn tendons, useless. Sasuke had lost his obi and shirt, his pants had one leg missing up to the knee. His whole chest was covered in dirt and ash, marring his pale skin. The Rinnegan practically glowed, freshly placed in his socket. Missing a jacket and most of his mesh shirt, Naruto was barely standing. He leaned against the walls Sasuno's wings created, out of breath and wounds slow to heal. Even with the power of the sage, the sun, and the moon on their palms, Naruto and Sasuke weren't strong enough. They had, somehow, managed to keep Sakura and Kakashi alive, just barely. The two teens looked at each other, the connection they shared allowing them to talk through thoughts. The sage had showed them another way. Sakura wobbled over to the boys, her legs close to giving out on her. Her sandal caught on some rocks, causing her to tumble into Naruto. He caught her, his hands tore and bleeding against her uniform. Naruto. Sasuke's voice was hoarse as he called out. Yeah, he still had his hand around Sakura, holding her up. We have a plan. It's reckless, and might not work, but it's a plan. Sakura looked between them, her surprise evident on her face. What is it? Kakashi leaned against a boulder, his chest throbbing and head thumping. Sakura only had so much time to heal him before her wrist got torn. Then Kaguya nearly destroyed them with meteors. It was Sasuke's quick thinking that saved the four. Nothing could protect the others, the rest of the allied shinobi forces lay unprotected, dying. Or already dead. He watched his kids, his team, the children he was given to train who turned into something bigger than himself. They were huddled together looking haggard and war-worn. He noticed Sasuke's hair was singed on the side. Sakura's midriff was showing thanks to her uniform getting shredded. Then he noticed Naruto's eyes on him. Something passed over the blonde's face as Sasuke whispered beside him. The crystal blue eyes darkened and shimmered in the purple glow of the Susanoo. The three began a slow walk toward their former sensei. Kaka-sensei, Naruto began, kneeling down in front of him. We have an idea. His mouth turned to a frown as he glanced between his two teammates. There's a way we can stop this. Naruto waved his hand around, indicating the whole war and situation in general. We can give the world a second chance, but we need your help. Sasuke, who remained standing, crossed his arms and looked down at him. The sage showed Naruto an Iaijutsu for time travel. Kakashi's eyes widened. He couldn't have heard that right. Time travel is impossible, can't happen, not logical. It's the Rinnegan, sensei, Sakura explained. With enough chakra, we can send you back. Wait, send me back. Kakashi's eyes snapped to hers. No. One of you would make more sense. I can't go back. Kakashi. Sasuke cut him off. The sage refilled our chakra. Sakura still has a decent supply left. You, however, are nearly done. You are the obvious choice to send back. He tried to stand up, but he stumbled. Sakura caught him before he fell flat on his face. Sensei, please. Just listen. We've discussed this, at length. His throat closed up as he looked at his pupils, his kids. They all grew up too fast, lost their innocence too soon. They were all so smart, so powerful. And they got that way on their own, with no help from him. I screwed up at every turn. I hid things from you, didn't take care of you. He looked at Sasuke with pleading eyes. I let you stew in your hatred, never tried to bring you out of it. I was never your sensei when I needed to be. He motioned toward Sakura. And you, I saw your insecurities and just left you to deal with them on your own. And Naruto, I didn't do anything right with you. With a sad smile on his face, Naruto hit his knees in front of his beloved sensei. He took in the fear in Kakashi's eyes. Sensei, you helped me in ways you will never know. There was never a moment you made me feel as if I was the demon the village thought of me as. You pushed me to become stronger, better than I was. And I understand why you didn't want to be closer to me. I've met my parents, Sensei. I look just like them. It had to be hard to look at me and not see them. That's not an excuse, Naruto. Kakashi ran a shaky hand through his hair, it was covered in dirt and grime. I was so lost in my own grief I never fully let myself care about you guys. Sakura huffed out a laugh from her place beside Kakashi. Oh, Sensei, you're such a liar. You tried so hard to deny it, but you cared about us so much. We sensed it. There was a choked sound from Kakashi as he bent his head forward. It wasn't enough. I was never enough. He felt a strong hand on his shoulder. When he looked up, he saw mismatched eyes staring back. Kakashi. It's not like you to wallow in self-doubt. This is your chance to make everything right. Sakura leaned in front of his face. When you go back, don't let me fawn all over Sasuke. Put my head in the game, make me work as hard as the boys. Push me into medic training early so I can save these two when they get hurt. She hiked a thumb toward her teammates. Tell me about my parents. Naruto chimed in. I can handle it, I promise. It will make me want to learn about them, about my clan. There's so much more I could be, you can make me that. I know you can. Push me. Don't let me give up. And always remember, Sensei, I learn best by doing, not from lectures. He said the last part with a wink. Sasuke took a pause, closing his eyes to gather his thoughts. I was alone. For the longest time I thought that is what I wanted. When Team 7 was formed, I felt like they would bring me down, be a liability, make me weaker. I was told to live in anger, to hate and get stronger with the hate. But, being with you guys reminded me what it felt like to have a family. He took a deep breath as if the words coming out were actually hurting him. Orochimaru's curse seal, it puts thoughts into your head. It makes you believe he is the only one who could help you. I was in a dark place for a long time. Kakashi, don't let me kill my brother. Please. Their minds were made up, Kakashi could see that. There was nothing he could do or say to change it. In their heads, this was the only way. The air was stagnant inside of Susanoo's protective wings. Everything was coated in a purple glow that glinted off of every reflective surface around them. Sensei. Naruto prompted. It's time to go. Tears welled up in Kakashi's eyes as he looked at his students. Wait, he felt for someone's hand to hold and pulled them forward. It was Sasuke who fell into his shoulder. He flailed out again, gripping a mesh shirt and pulling forward. He caught Sakura next, having all of his kids in his arms again. You need to know, all of you. I'm so proud of you all. Sasuke was tense in the hug as if it was taking his willpower to hold him there. Naruto and Sakura, however, melted into him as if this was what they'd needed to hear. With a jolt to his heart, Kakashi realized they probably did need to hear it. He'd never said it before. Sasuke allowed the hug for longer than Kakashi had expected before he pulled back. Kakashi. He nodded and reached for help to stand up. Sakura and Naruto took each side, pulling him up by the armpits. Wavering and hunched over, he locked his knees and held still. Sasuke stood in front of him, Naruto and Sakura flanking him, hand on his shoulder. A flurry of hand signs and Sasuke closed his right eye, focusing on Kakashi with the Rinnegan. A tear ripped behind him, black and purple dancing around inside the opening. You can do this, Sensei. Sakura smiled. A nagging question tugged at Kakashi's mind, but he was afraid of the answer. He had to know, though. What will happen to you three? We will cease to exist, Sasuke said simply. Naruto nudged at Sasuke, a silent reprimand. We're aiming for before the Chunin exams. It depends on how much chakra we have. Kurama is helping, but he doesn't have his full reserve right now. You will wake up in your body as you were then, but you will have all of these memories. So you can stop what needs stopped and change what needs changed. Sakura tilted her head and smiled. It was so nostalgic Kakashi could have cried. No pressure, sensei, Naruto added with a smirk. There was a wind-heavy whistle sound coming from the tier behind Kakashi. He sent a glance to it before turning back to his kids. He'd always thought of them as his. No matter what they did, who they become, he would always. I love you kids. Sasuke's eyes widened, his face slack in shock. Then he schooled it again, blank of emotion. Naruto and Sakura teared up, lips wobbling. Step into the portal, sensei. Sasuke's voice was low as he said the honorific the first time to Kakashi. It didn't go unnoticed by anyone. They all sensed the shift around them, the click in Sasuke's mind as he fully realized what happened, what he lost when he left. He had a second chance, they all did. It was on Kakashi's shoulders. It wasn't fair, but it was the only way. One last look at his kids, at how they were now, and Kakashi slowly turned around. With haggard, slow steps, he hobbled toward the tier in time behind him. It felt like a tug behind his navel, someone reaching inside of him and pulling. His ears rang, his vision spun in front of him. Kakashi shut his eyes tight, his stomach lurching and twisting. Then nothing. Darkness. Chapter 2, Waking Up a Lifetime Ago. When Kakashi opened his eyes, there was sunlight. It felt like a dream, the battlefield. He could still smell the acrid, stale smell of death and ashes. He could still feel the grime and dirt clinging to his skin, to his hair. Looking down, he realized there was no blood on his clothes, no gashes on his chest. There were no tears and rips to his uniform, no singe marks decorating his hair. He was healthy and whole. The world was back to normal. The kids he'd come to care for, come to love, were gone. Birds chirping outside his window reminded Kakashi of his current predicament. There were no birds on the battlefield, barely anything living remained there. But here, in the past, everything is still alive. All his comrades, all the kids, everyone is still here. Kakashi sat up, eyeing the calendar above his dresser. They said they were aiming for the Chunin exams. A bright red circle around the current date proved they overshot by a few months. Today was the day Kakashi met his new genin and found 3 new people to die protecting. This time he wouldn't mess it up. He wouldn't let their sacrifice be in vain. He got out of bed and took a shower. There was no blood, no marks, to signify he was in a war, but Kakashi still scrubbed his skin raw trying to rid himself of them. The shower spray washed over him, the water so hot it was turning his skin red. He tilted his head back, letting the burning water hit his face. The memories wouldn't burn away, the visions of his comrades dying, of his one-time best friend being who brought this all on wouldn't leave him. Obito. Could he save him this time? Could he reach him in time? He kept that thought in his head as he stepped out of the shower and continued to get ready for the day. He had a lot of thinking to do, a lot of planning to do. But, he needed to get to the academy to meet his students for right now. This time around he wouldn't stop at the memorial and talk to a ghost that wasn't there. He wouldn't lament his woes to a man who still existed. The world moved around him in slow motion. People going about their lives as if the world wouldn't end in a few years. He shook the thoughts away and continued walking, not stopping until he was at the academy doors. Umino Iruka met him outside, a smile on his face. "Your 3 are waiting for you in the classroom. You're not as late as I thought you'd be." Kakashi had to laugh. Iruka always had a way with those a higher rank than himself. Just because he never became more than a Chunin didn't mean he was weak. He had something a lot of other people didn't. He had a presence. Iruka demanded respect from Jounin the way he demanded it around his students. And, for the most part, he got it. He'd earned it. Hell, none of them had signed up to teach classrooms full of children with dangerous ninja tools. They'd never handled them before, but they had the bravado of someone who did. The number of scars the Chunin had from some academy students who missed their targets was numerous. If there was one thing Kakashi could do, had to do, was keep up appearances. What am I in for? He did, after all, have to pretend he'd never met these kids before. Iruka looked him over for a moment as if assessing how much to tell him. "Well, you already know you have Uchiha Sasuke." He doesn't talk much but is always listening, taking everything in. Hasn't awakened the Sharingan yet. He's a quick learner, definitely a prodigy. Haruno Sakura is second. She's book smart. Her physical grades weren't the best, but her mental rivaled Sasuke. She's a preteen girl, though. Boys are all that's on her mind. Here he paused, choosing his next words carefully. Of all his kids, Naruto was the most important to Iruka. The last one you have is Uzumaki Naruto. I know you have history with, but don't hold that against him. He's had it rough his whole life. Iruka. Kakashi had to stop him. He had to keep Iruka from thinking he would do anything less than take care of the boy. I don't hold what happened against him. He was an infant. Naruto didn't do anything wrong. Seemingly calmed down, Iruka nodded. He competes with Sasuke. They're rivals. When you're teaching him something, he learns better by doing than by reading it or being lectured. As a matter of fact, don't lecture him. He will tune you out. With a glance back in the building, Iruka sighed. I guess this is where I hand them off to you. Kakashi nodded, scratching the back of his head. If he'd gotten to the academy earlier last time, thought to ask about his kids then, would that have changed anything? As it was, he needed to mentally prepare himself to walk into that classroom. I'll take over from here. You'll still know what's going on when you go on ramen dates with Naruto. Iruka laughed. True. He moved out of the way, letting Kakashi inside. They're just kids, Kakashi. Remember that. Oh, how he remembered that. Kakashi walked slowly down the corridor, his feet feeling like lead and his head full of memories. It looked the same as it did back then. The same paint peeling on the walls, pictures from the smaller kids decorating the hallways. Same nameplates above the door, same teachers in the same rooms. Taking a deep breath, Kakashi let his senses flare out. 3 small chakra presences stood out in front of him. 3 young kids who were only a small piece of what they could be. Taking a deep breath, he opened the door. Naruto didn't have the time to set up the chalk eraser trap. They hadn't waited nearly as long in that lonely room as they had last time. Instead, they were all waiting in separate areas. Naruto was writing something rude on the chalkboard. Sasuke sat with his hands steepled in front of his chin. Sakura stood somewhere in between them, not sure what to do with herself. Yo! Kakashi got their attention. I'm Hatake Kakashi, your Jounin sensei for Team 7. 3 sets of eyes were on him in an instant, all sizing him up and trying to figure him out. He allowed it for a moment before turning and walking away, waiting to hear them follow. Follow they did, after a beat. Their footsteps fell in line behind him, Naruto chattering to Sakura, who kept shushing him. Sasuke, as usual, said nothing. A small garden on the roof of a neighboring building is where Kakashi had taken them last time. No one else came there at this time of day when the sun was highest in the sky. He took a seat on the banister, motioning for the 3 kids to take a seat. As before, Sasuke sat in the middle of the 3, looking as disinterested as a 12-year-old can. Naruto fidgeted to his left, constantly adjusting his headband and wiggling in place. Then there was Sakura, on Sasuke's right, cheeks red as she took in her crush. It was so nostalgic, Kakashi had to take a moment to just breathe. Say, Kakashi-sensei, what are we doing now? Naruto broke through his thoughts with his loud, boisterous voice. He'd almost forgotten how attention-starved the boy was. The Naruto he'd left behind wasn't nearly as starved for attention, especially since the fight with Pain had people begging to be around him. But this young boy was starved of common human contact, and, that, he could change right now. We are going to introduce ourselves. He spread out his arms. I, for example, am Hatake Kakashi. I'm a Jounin who used to be in the Umbu. My hobbies are reading and learning new jutsu. My dislikes are people who don't care for their comrades. My goal is to train you kids into powerful shinobi. He pointed at Naruto. Your turn, Blondie. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. He graced them with a beaming smile. My hobbies are eating ramen and playing pranks. My dislikes are the 3 minutes it takes for ramen to cook and people who are mean to other people. My goal is to become Hokage. The Jounin kept his composure enough to point at Sakura. He wasn't ready for Sasuke, yet. She fisted her hands in her skirt. Harano Sakura. My hobbies are, my goals are. Kakashi interrupted her before she started squealing. Iruka-sensei told me you had the highest grade of all the kunoichi in your class. He also said you have amazing chakra control. Sakura blushed. Yeah. I guess. As part of your training with me, I'm going to push you to use your strengths. Have you thought about becoming a medic? She tilted her head in thought. Think about it, Sakura. She nodded and Kakashi pointed at Sasuke. Uchiha Sasuke. I don't have any hobbies. I don't really like or dislike anything. My goal, or ambition, I guess, is to kill a certain man. He never moved other than his mouth as he talked. The other two just stared at him. Kakashi, however, had time to learn how to handle a brooding Sasuke. If he hadn't been so caught up in his grief the first time around, he would have seen this for what it was. A cry for help. Pushing himself off the railing, Kakashi walked over to Sasuke. He placed a hand on the young boy's head, ruffling the hair, much to Sasuke's disdain. When you're ready, we need to talk about that man. Sasuke's whole body shifted to look at Kakashi's face. I think there are some things you should know. As much as Kakashi didn't want to have this conversation, as much as he knew it would hurt the boy, he knew it had to be done. Sasuke deserved to know the truth as much as Naruto deserved to know the truth about his past. What do you know? Kakashi nodded. In time, Sasuke, I will tell you. For now, we need to make sure you pass my exam tomorrow morning. Before Sasuke could say anything else, Naruto was up off the step and in front of Kakashi. Hey. Sensei. What do you mean by a test tomorrow? We already passed our Genin test. Again, the glaring fact that Naruto was ignored his entire life practically slapped the Jounin in the face. The kid put himself in front of people, being loud and in their faces to keep their attention. It made something cold settle in Kakashi's chest. A glimpse of the Naruto he'd left behind appeared before him. It solidified his promise to change the way this timeline panned out. With his hands on Naruto's shoulders, Kakashi leaned down to show the kid he had his full attention. Immediately, Naruto settled down, melting into the friendly contact. You may have passed Iruka's test, but as your Jounin sensei, I'm giving you another one. But, why, sensei? Sakura had scooted herself over closer to Sasuke, who had turned his body toward Kakashi. So I know what your strengths and weaknesses are. The three kids exchanged glances. Go home and prepare. I'll see you at 5 tomorrow. Don't eat breakfast, you'll just throw it up. He flickered away, just far enough to be out of sight but close enough to still hear them talk. The last time he'd gone off to Obito's grave, telling him about the kids. This time he wanted to know what they did. Immediately, Naruto asked Sakura to go for ramen with him. She turned him down rather harshly before practically pasting herself to Sasuke's side, begging for him to do something with her. Sasuke ignored her completely and just walked away, hands in his pockets and head down. The three departed. Sasuke likely heading toward his apartment. A crestfallen Sakura pushed past Naruto and stomped off toward her house. Naruto stayed behind a while, his head down and hands fisted at his sides. Then, after a moment, picked his head back up, shook himself off, and began walking toward Ichiraku. Kakashi scratched the back of his head as he watched his kids go separate ways. One more day of being alone, kids. We will be a family tomorrow. Chapter 3, Echoes of Time. Why are you down here, kid? Naruto jolted. His eyes opened to a haze of fog and dull yellow lights bouncing off the walls in small slivers. There were gray walls surrounding him, the musty smell of stagnant water and stale air all that meets his nose. Shifting his feet and hearing a swishing sound, he looked down to see himself standing in ankle-deep water. Come to laugh at me? Come to poke at the animal behind the bars? Large yellow eyes peered at him through the darkness. Naruto felt fear ripple through him. Where was he? Who was talking to him? There were steel bars in front of him that reached into the ceiling. The hinges were as thick as Naruto was tall, the bars could hold 4 of him easily. In the center was a large piece of parchment with seal written on it in careful red brush strokes. On the other side of the bars, it was dark. All that could be seen were the large yellow eyes. "Talk to me, boy." A black nose pushed against the bars, blowing out air that sent his hair flying back and stinging his eyes. One large claw slowly slid through the bars, the sharp edge glinting in the faint light. It didn't stop until Naruto felt it push against his stomach. Naruto jumped out of his stupor. The touch of the claw sent a cold shiver through his spine that contrasted with the burn of something on his skin. Blue eyes, widened, looked down at the claw. "Why do you look at me as if you are afraid? I'm stuck here. Stuck inside you. Didn't anyone tell you?" Naruto's eyes snapped to his. Something cold washed over him. "You're the Kyuubi. You're the reason everyone is afraid of me and treats me so bad." A rumble went through the dungeon, ripples forming on the water. It was laughing. "Yes. I'm the evil in your heart. Those people need to be punished, don't you agree? Let me out, kid. We can show them, together, what true power is." Naruto shivered. Goosebumps cascaded up his arms and legs. Nothing made sense. Was this a dream? It felt too real to be a dream. The claw poked him in the stomach again before retreating back into the darkness. Of course he was angry at the village. Nobody loved him, cared for him, and he had no idea why. Until Mizuki told him. Then it all made sense. They hated him because of what was inside of him. "How did you get inside me?" The question had been on his mind since the night with Mizuki and Iruka-sensei in the forest. Again, a rumbling laughter left the darkness. "Your parents put me here." The knowledge hit him like a freight train. It hit him so hard he sat up straight in bed, his hand over his heart and breathing heavily. His own parents made him the pariah? Why would they do that and then just leave him behind? If Iruka-sensei knew about the Kyuubi, does he know about Naruto's parents, too? The alarm startled him when it went off, signaling it was 4 in the morning. He stumbled out of bed and into the bathroom, turning on the hot water to give his shower time to warm up. There was no way Naruto could go to Iruka-sensei before training with Kakashi-sensei. It was too early in the morning, that would be rude to wake him up. Naruto walked into the kitchen and poured a bowl of cereal. He had time to wait before the hot water even attempted to reach his apartment, so he prepared his breakfast first. There was time to make up his mind on what to do and how to process his new information. While thinking, the hot water finally began spraying in low pressure and his cereal turned to mush. Forgetting to eat and take a shower, he still didn't know what to do when it was time to leave his apartment. At least he remembered to turn the water off before he left. A yellow bird was perched on the windowsill in Sakura's bedroom. The birdsong woke her up, the melody getting stuck in her brain. She hummed it while getting ready for training and tying on her headband. Today was a big day. Today she got tested, officially, as a genin. If she passed, she would be accepted on a team with Uchiha Sasuke. The thrill of that knowledge, of getting one over on Ino, ran down her spine. Another positive was her Jounin sensei. Sakura was smart, she does her research. She knew that Hatake Kakashi was one of the best ninjas Konoha had ever created. He excelled his entire way through his career, being one of the youngest to ever become a Jounin and then went on to become a commander in the Anbu. They were lucky to have him as their sensei, to have him willing to teach 3 kids who had never been in an actual fight before. She hopped down the stairs, smelling something wonderful in the kitchen. Too bad she couldn't eat today. Her father called to her before she could sprint past the living room. "Sakura, honey, come here." With a heavy sigh, Sakura peeked in the room. "Yes, Daddy." He was reading a paper, his legs crossed as he sat on the couch. There was a fresh cup of coffee sitting on the end table beside him, steam still twisting above the cup. "I know you have already heard this, but it's not too late to back out. Just because you can mold chakra doesn't mean you have to become a ninja, dear." "Daddy, we talked about this." They had talked about it. At length. Multiple times. She was well aware her parents only entertained her idea of becoming a ninja. They allowed her to join the academy, to train, in hopes she realized it was not something she wanted to do. They weren't too happy when she lasted until graduation, or that she passed graduation. Instead, this conversation had been nearly a daily thing in hopes to convince their headstrong daughter into quitting. It wasn't working. If anything, Sakura just dug her heels in deeper and did it out of spite. He took a sip of his coffee and sat the paper down, folding it back up neatly. Yes, we have. But I don't think you are actually listening to us. We just want you to stop and think. This will be your life now. How will you ever meet someone, settle down, give us grandkids? We just want you to be happy. It was the same argument every time. As if all women were good for was staying in the kitchen and having babies. Women could be ninja. Powerful ninja. Kakashi said it himself. She had incredible chakra control. She could do something amazing. She could be a medic. I am happy. I'm going to be a powerful ninja who can protect people. That's what I want to do. Just please be happy for me, Daddy. It was time for her to leave. She took a step toward the door and her father just sighed. Sakura prepared herself for the guilt trip he always gave her. Instead, it came from her mother poking her head through the kitchen doorway to insert herself into the conversation. We just don't want to plan our daughter's funeral. Enough was enough. Sakura slammed the door on her way out. She ignored the fact that the house shook when she stomped away. In the village of Konoha, one is considered an adult as soon as they become a genin. You can, theoretically, become a genin at any age. There was ninja who had become jounin before they were in double digits. An Uchiha is considered an adult when they can successfully form a fireball jutsu. Sasuke became an adult when he was 7. It wasn't because he could create an impressive fireball. It wasn't because he became a genin. It's because you can't stay a child when you've watched everyone die around you. They had removed him from the Uchiha district and put him in an apartment toward the center of town. He kicked and screamed until the Sandaime came to talk to him, to explain why they moved him. The district was stained with his family's blood. It wasn't safe for him to live there anymore. In an act of defiance, Sasuke ran to the gates, ready to prove to the elders he could take care of himself, he could live in his family's house on his own. He ripped through the yellow caution tape. His little legs didn't stop running until he stood at the door of his house. Blood splatter coated his front door. There were kunai and shuriken embedded in the wood of the fences and wall supports. Pushing the door open, Sasuke came face to face with his parents' chalk line. The blood still soaked into the floor. He could still see it. His parents laying on the ground, his father covering his mother. Itachi stood over them, eyes glowing red in the moonlight and the glint of his sword in the darkness. The Sandaime found him an hour later, laying on the floor beside the blood of his parents, sobbing so hard he could barely breathe. He picked Sasuke up and took him back to the apartment, soothing the small boy the best he could. Sasuke never went back to the district. He'd tried, but couldn't hold the contents of his stomach when he reached the gates. Instead, he stood on the roof of the arena and looked down upon the crumbling buildings and overgrown gardens, wishing he had the nerve to step in there and fix it. In the end, Sasuke always went back to his apartment. It wasn't home. Nothing would ever be home again. Today, Sasuke sat on the edge of his bed, wriggling his toes into the soft carpet. He couldn't sleep, tossing and turning all night. His bed was a mess, the sheet pulled off the corner. Kakashi had alluded to knowing Itachi, or knowing something about him. There wasn't a lot Sasuke knew of Itachi, even though they were brothers who lived in the same house. It seemed like his brother was always ethereal, untouchable, bigger than life itself. Maybe that's how all children felt about their older siblings, but there was something about Itachi. His alarm sounded from beside him. Sasuke barely heard it, just smacked the button to turn it off. Of course he'd be awake before the alarm. With a sigh, Sasuke pushed himself off the bed and stalked to his bathroom. All he wanted to do was show off his skill, cement his position as a genin, and find out what Kakashi knew about his brother. That was all. Time to get this day started. Kakashi came prepared. 4 bento boxes, 2 bells, his worn copy of Ika Ika Paradise, and a head full of ideas. The words of the kids he'd left behind rang in his ears, had rang all night. So, now was the time to act. He would not fail them. He would not let their sacrifices be in vain. Absolutely not. For now, he would plant the seed of his ideas, of what he knew they could accomplish. He already started with Sakura by planting the idea of a medic in her head. One thing he knew Naruto needed help with was chakra control. He has such a huge pool of chakra, and that chakra is so strong and wild, that Naruto needed to learn how to manage it. The control would never rival Sakura's. Not without years of solid training. All Kakashi wanted to accomplish was for Naruto to stop wasting so much of his chakra just doing a simple jutsu. It was a side effect of not only being an Uzumaki, with their large chakra pools, but of being a Jinchuriki. Kakashi knew Naruto could learn. The kid was smarter than anyone gave him credit for. He just learned differently. Kakashi would put that kid on the right path this time. Naruto had the potential to use any jutsu he came in contact with. Kakashi would make sure the kid learned how. Sasuke had always been gifted in taijutsu. He excelled with his lean muscle and long limbs. It made sense that he would be equally as gifted in kenjutsu. Giving the kid a sword and letting him get a handle on it before he hit puberty would give the kid an edge. Sasuke also needed some chakra control refining. It would only help when Kakashi retaught the Chidori. He'd seen what Sasuke had become based on hatred and anger. Now he wanted to see the Sasuke who learned with love and respect. And a Sasuke who worked with his team instead of trying to run them. Maybe Kakashi could smack some teamwork into his head, as well. That's not to mention his final promise to Sasuke, to keep him in the village and away from the thoughts that would lead him to kill his brother. He knew Sasuke would be waiting for the conversation. Kakashi had spent the entire night trying to word it in his head. He still didn't have it all planned out. Keeping Sakura from fawning over Sasuke would be a challenge all in its own. That girl clung to her first love like a dog to a bone. Kakashi wasn't sure how much of it was an actual crush and how much of it was just a rivalry with Ino, but Sakura didn't have time for it. She wasn't a weak damsel who needed a strapping Uchiha to save her. The Sakura he knew could punch through boulders like rice paper. Before Tsunade got to this village, Kakashi would put Sakura on the path to be the next female Sannin. She needed pushed. She needed to be given a reason to stand by their sides. He wasn't waiting for Zabuza and Haku to be the push she needed. Letting the boys be the reason she pushes herself would be a better way. He took up his seat on top of a training log and waited. Glancing at the memorial behind him, he had a longing to talk to Obito. But Obito is still alive. Kakashi would get to him as soon as he could. He would bring his best friend back. Instead, Kakashi turned his head up to the sky, letting the sunlight warm his face through the mask. He imagined Rin looking down on him, smiling at him. It was better than wallowing in grief while staring at a cold stone. Rin was more than just a monument. Rin was the sun. And, today, Kakashi let it wash over him. Chapter 4, A Fresh Start. At 4:45 in the morning, Konoha was just waking up. Civilians in the workforce are just leaving their houses, kissing their spouses, and heading off to work. There were birds hopping on power lines, squirrels and chipmunks scampering up and down trees and through flower beads. Sakura watched them, absent-mindedly, as she headed toward the training ground. Attempting to get her mother's words out of her head, she tried to remember the birdsong from earlier, trying to chase the tune just out of reach. Her backpack jingled as she walked, her keychains from the academy rattling. They were something the girls collected, another way to prove your status that didn't matter. She really should have removed them, left them at home, but she'd forgotten. A shopkeeper opened the wooden shutters over his booth, talking loudly with one of his employees in the back room. Sakura watched as a stray cat jumped on the booth, meowing loudly. The shopkeeper, although a rough-looking man, smiled and patted the cat before reaching under the counter and pouring some cat food into a small bowl. At the crossroad ahead of her, she saw a shock of bright blonde hair bouncing out of a shop door. In between the crowd of people, she caught sight of a purple outfit that was familiar. Ino. Sakura couldn't resist the urge to flaunt her position on Sasuke's team at every given chance. She bounced toward Ino, the jingling of the backpack more intense. Ino. Sakura sing-songed. How are you today? Ino turned around, her long ponytail whipping around with the movement. Sakura. She weaved through the crowd, meeting Sakura halfway. You're up early. Early training. Sakura gave a sweet smile, almost fake. I'm on my way there, now. Sasuke should already be there. There was a twitch in Ino's eyebrow as she took in the information. I'd still like to know how you cheated your way onto his team. We all know my grades were better than yours. Sakura laughed. You wish. Waving her hand, she smiled and began walking away. Bye, Ino. I'll tell Sasuke you said hello. She heard the blonde growl and stomp her foot as she rounded the corner and let a smile play on her face. Throughout Naruto's short life, he'd learned hate. It surrounded him like a wet blanket, something he couldn't shake off no matter how hard he tried and tried and tried. His first memory, one created out of fear and loneliness, was from when he was 3. The old woman at the orphanage refused to feed him that morning. He was hungry, his little stomach growling as he walked the streets in a shirt 2 sizes too big for him and shorts a size too small. The elastic was digging into his waist when he knelt down to pick up an odd-shaped pebble off the ground. When he stood up, something hot hit his back, soaking through his shirt and burning his skin. Naruto yelled out, his little arms trying to get it off of him, pulling the shirt over his head and nearly tripping over it. The smell of jasmine tea soaked into his skin. Demon brat! He heard someone yell. He turned around, the pain in his back burning like fire. The man just glared at him, a teacup hanging limply in his hand. Who let you out of your cage? The look in the man's eyes, the anger and coldness and hate, Naruto never forgot. He carried that with him his entire life, just clinging to his every social interaction from then on. That look in that man's eyes he'd seen nearly every day since then. He sees it in the villagers as they stare, whisper behind their hands, and pull their kids away from him. He sees it in the teachers at the academy who all but refused to teach him, the librarian, the landlord, the shopkeepers, and he never understood why. Not until he was 12 and failed the academy exam again and stole the sacred scroll from Hokageji's office. That particular memory came to him again as he walked the streets of Konoha, passing the tea house where he was burned. He has a habit of walking on the opposite side of the street when he comes across this building. Today was no different. He clung to the left side of the street, being as far away from the smell of jasmine tea he could get. Just the smell of that particular flavor of tea turned his stomach. Naruto gripped the straps of his backpack and tilted his head down, walking fast past the tea shop. All he wanted was for the smell of jasmine to leave his nose. It wasn't until he got to the end of the street that the smell faded away. The street ended in a Y, one path led to the center of town, the other led to the outskirts. Naruto took the latter, feet kicking up dust as cobblestone turned to dirt the further he walked. The trees got thicker, here, with low-hanging limbs and leaves thick enough to make the sunlight look like glitter. He saw the clearing up ahead, saw 3 figures through the trees announcing he was the last to arrive. Picking up his pace, Naruto jogged into the training field. He just hoped he wouldn't get in trouble, not on his first day. Dropping his backpack on the ground, Sasuke took in the new training field. He'd never been to this one before. Sasuke had his own training area, a small clearing he'd found years ago. Small, handmade targets decorated the area, the trees pockmarked by kunai and shuriken that tracked his progress through the years. This training field was too fresh, too untouched. The training posts looked new, no nicks and dents in them from practices. Kakashi sat atop the middle post, his eye crinkled into a smile as he watched the Uchiha. On the ground was a straw-woven basket, out of place in a training field. The second to arrive was Sakura, her backpack jingling behind her as she jogged into the clearing. She took a moment to wave at Sasuke, as if he hadn't already seen her, before carefully setting her backpack down beside his. Assuming her normal position when around Sasuke, she clasped her hands together in front of her chest and began blushing. Nostalgia was in full swing today. Kakashi was going to drown in it as he watched the disinterested expression on Sasuke's face. She had just opened her mouth, beginning a conversation with Sasuke that Kakashi was sure the boy would ignore. Sakura, Kakashi called out to her, stopping the girl from attempting any conversation with Sasuke. He pulled another book from his pouch, worn with age and use, and held it out to her. She walked toward him, meeting halfway, and looked from his outstretched hand to his face, unsure. Chakra control theory, as it pertains to Medicnin, is very precise. It requires control and resolve and patience, all of which I believe you have. She took the book out of his hands, her eyes wide with awe. This should help you begin your journey. The book, entitled Medical Chakra Theory by Senjutsu Tsunade, was gripped tightly in her hand. She looked from the book to his face before giving him a shy smile. Thank you, sensei. He smiled and ruffled her hair, happy to put her on the right path. The Sakura he'd left behind had this book. She'd shown it to him one day, when they were camping while on a mission. It was the most important tangible object she'd gotten from Tsunade. The copy she had was filled with notes in the margins and sticky notes of diagrams. Kakashi had a feeling this copy would soon resemble that one. Kakashi watched as Sakura sat against one of the smooth training posts, opening the book with awe in her eyes. Sasuke stood to the side with his arms crossed, watching Kakashi warily. Truth be told, Kakashi still wasn't sure how to begin the subject of attacking with Sasuke. The subject had been churned over and over in his head, false starts, and bad wording all he'd had. There was so much, everything so heavy, to just blurt it out without a thought. Sasuke would have questions, he would be angry and lash out, and it was all deserved. He'd earned it. Kakashi wasn't around with the other Sasuke found out. He wasn't around to provide a balm to the wound that knowledge created. It had broken him, warped him into a Sasuke Kakashi didn't know. This time, Kakashi would be there. He'd be the calm in Sasuke's storm. But not right now. It wasn't time yet. He needed Sasuke's head in the game for this test. Heavy footsteps sounded before Kakashi saw an orange blur whip past him. Slipping his backpack off his shoulders, Naruto threw it toward the other two. He missed the small pile by a few feet. His bag bounced across the ground, landing behind Sasuke's and Sakura's. The boy skid to a stop in front of Kakashi, hair wind-whipped and looking embarrassed. Sorry sensei. I had to, detour the tea house because they were making jasmine tea, and I hate the smell of jasmine tea. Before that, I had to wait for the hot water to get to my apartment, which always takes a while because the pipes are old, or something like that. But before that, I had this really weird dream, and I have a question I need to ask Iruka-sensei, but I can ask you dash. Kakashi leaned down, gripping Naruto's shoulders and meeting him at eye level. It's okay, Naruto. You're not late. The embarrassed look eased off of Naruto's face at his words, looking more relieved than anything else. Just like last time, Naruto unconsciously melted into the touch, chasing the warmth Kakashi's hands provided. The small, touch-starved boy gave Kakashi a small smile. I'm ready, sensei. Naruto aimed for his normal bravado, but his voice shook. Kakashi chose to ignore it, giving Naruto's shoulder a light squeeze before standing up. He kept one hand on Naruto as he turned around to address the group. Motioning with his free hand to get Sasuke's and Sakura's attention, Kakashi began to explain the objective. See these bells? He clipped them to his belt. You have to take a bell off of me. There's only 2 bells. Sakura raised her hand, the book still held close to her chest with the other one. What happens to the person who doesn't get a bell? Then you don't eat. Kakashi shrugged. Simple as that. He wasn't going to pretend they wouldn't make it. He wasn't going to pretend these 3 don't already have his heart and soul and undying love. Foregoing his bullshit about sending them back to the academy altogether, Kakashi just skipped straight to the test. He knew they'd fail. They did last time. And it would be Naruto tied to the tree again, just as it had been before. Kakashi had to resign himself to being drowned in nostalgia for the rest of his days. He knew he'd never get used to it. It would always hit him like a rakery through the heart. When his predictions came true, Kakashi stood in front of them, his hands on his hips and fake anger on his face. He took in their faces, the way Sasuke had fear in his eyes at the prospect of delaying his plan, of Sakura being scared to disappoint and prove her parents right, and Naruto, who was so used to being told he was useless and unwanted, just resigned himself to hear it again. Kakashi could have kicked himself for not seeing it way back then. How did he miss the dejected looks on their faces? The pang of déjà vu threw off his vertigo as he watched them sit in their discomfort. Sasuke and Sakura still had their hands in the air, chopsticks full of food and halfway to Naruto's mouth. Kakashi schooled his face, sliding back into his aloof posture like slipping on an old coat. You all pass. He walked behind the post and cut through Naruto's ropes, sending the young boy sliding to the ground. If you take one thing from this test, take this: teamwork is, and always will be, the most important thing. He disappeared long enough to pull 2 more bento boxes from the picnic basket before appearing in front of them again. One for Naruto, who practically drooled over it, and one for him. He sat, cross-legged, in front of them, willingly eating without his mask. Naruto plucked the tomato from his rice and placed it in Sasuke's box. Sasuke side-eyed him but hurriedly ate it. Naruto then picked up his grilled salmon and placed it in Sakura's. Payback for feeding him earlier. There was silence as they ate, all of them going over what had just happened in their heads. When Kakashi was done with his food and had slid his mask back into place, he took in his 3 students. It was as if they were waiting for their prison sentence, the way they held themselves stiff and hands clenched. It was Sasuke's curiosity that won out. Something danced in his eyes as he took in his sensei, although he'd had yet to call him that. Kakashi was never one for formalities or honorifics, so it didn't bother him that Sasuke doesn't say them. Although it had felt amazing to hear the young man call him sensei in his final minutes on the battlefield. You said yesterday this was testing our abilities. Ah, yes I did. Of course, it would be Sasuke who would remember and would be the most curious. I have tested you, each of you. I've seen your strengths and weakness and where we need the most work done. Which means we will be working both individually and together. That did little to placate Sasuke, who just stared at him, an unreadable look on his face. Would you like a rundown of how you did, Sasuke? I do. Naruto bounced where he was sitting. Please, sensei. I want to know. Sakura scoffed at him and Naruto immediately looked chastised. That was one thing Kakashi wanted to change, the way Sakura treated Naruto. He thought back to before when he'd watched Sakura punch him into the ground so hard even Kyuubi took a while to heal him. He remembered the way Naruto would flinch when she'd turn on him, her eyes dark, at something he'd said. That, he would change. He never wanted Naruto to flinch away from any of them ever again. The kid deserved to be loved and cared for. Instead of voicing his disdain to Sakura for her treatment of him, he'd voice that later. Kakashi just nodded and smiled at Naruto. Well, kid, your greatest strength is your nearly endless stamina and large chakra reserve. In all the years I've been a ninja, I have never seen anyone who can summon as many clones as you can. If we polish up your taijutsu, which, honestly, isn't too bad, you will definitely be formidable. And, with that reserve, you can do nearly any jutsu you put your mind to. Naruto, mouth slack and eyes wide, just stared at him. Kakashi was hit with the thought that Naruto probably never had anyone praise him before. Maybe Iruka-sensei, but no one else. It took a long moment for Naruto to respond. When he did, his eyes watery and red-rimmed, he threw himself at Kakashi. He enveloped the kid in a tight hug. Thanks, sensei. Naruto blubbered against Kakashi's flak jacket, fat tears streaming down his face. It's the truth, kid. Kakashi messed his hair, a fond smile on his face. Naruto pulled back and hastily wiped at his eyes. As he sat back in his spot, Kakashi turned to Sakura. You're book smart, you get the theory of how things work. Now we just need to put in the work. We definitely need to work on your taijutsu, and we will. I think the more you train with the boys, the better you'll get. I'm sure, with your chakra skills, you will go farther than you think. Sakura nodded, taking it all in. She knew her taijutsu skills weren't great, but her ninjutsu and chakra skills made up for it in the graduation exam. Her test scores went far in putting her on Sasuke's team, which was what she was aiming for. Getting one over on Ino. They'd been rivals in love for so long, getting Sasuke's attention the prize, that Sakura almost didn't know her own identity. If she learned everything Kakashi had to offer, surely, she'd become someone she could be proud of. Surely. Letting Sakura stew in her own thoughts, he turned to Sasuke. And, you, Uchiha. I'm reminded a lot of myself when I look at you. I'm hoping to cut my bad habits out of you, however. From what I understood, your highest grades were in taijutsu, and I can see why. You and Naruto got the closest to the bells, which is impressive. I've never had anyone get that close before. Have you ever thought of Kenjutsu? Sasuke shook his head. The idea of using something other than ninjutsu and ninja tools never entered his head before. But, now that Kakashi had brought it up, the idea made sense. It would flow seamlessly with Taijutsu, after all. If it's something you decide you want to try, we will find you a sword. You're proficient in ninjutsu, also. We can work on your chakra reserve, it's easy to work on it, make it larger. Sakura snapped out of her stupor to take in what Kakashi said. She'd only read about it before. It seemed like a simple meditation technique you were supposed to do twice a day. Chakra meditation. Kakashi nodded. Sakura tried to remember what she'd read, how to do it. Sit cross-legged, the back of your hands on your knees, pointer and thumb pressed together, eyes closed. Mimicking it, she heard a fond laugh leave Kakashi. She cracked an eye open, expecting to see a condescending look on his face. Instead, she saw the indentation of a smile through his mask. Again, Sakura knows her theory. He reached out, adjusting where her hands rested on her knees. A little more facing out. Just touch your fingers, don't press them together. Sakura adjusted, wiggling in her seat. The boys watched on before copying her. A big part of this meditation was the pose. It had to be perfect or the chakra wouldn't flow correctly. Back straight, Naruto. The blonde followed his instructions. Don't press your fingers together too hard, Sasuke. They just need to touch. Sasuke cracked an eye and adjusted his fingers. Now what, sensei? Sakura asked. How do we know we are doing it right? Kakashi took up the pose. Open your eyes and watch me. The kids did as told, watching him carefully. Your chakra flows through you like a separate bloodstream. You can feel the rush of it if you focus hard enough. When they teach you in the academy, they teach you to feel it, to try to control it. I know that Naruto had a hard time with that. He paused to watch the kid nod his head. What I want for you to do today is just feel. Concentrate your chakra in one part of your body. Your hands, for instance. Just feel it. Blue surrounded the Jounin's hands, his chakra flowing around him. The kids gasped before putting their all into trying it themselves. He watched as his students sat there, trying to control their chakra in one spot. Sakura's hands easily turned blue, her chakra hovering over the surface. A moment later, Sasuke's hands began to glow. Naruto's continued to stay blank. 5 minutes later, they were still blank. He cracked an eye open, looking at the others with a dejected expression. His chakra control was always his downfall. There was no way he could do this. It was pointless. He faltered in his stance, wiggling in place. Feeling his chakra wasn't the problem, it was making it stay in one place that was the issue. Naruto sighed, knowing this was pointless. Deep inside he could feel the rumble of the Kyuubi laughing at him. Naruto. Kakashi's voice sounded over the Kyuubi, keeping Naruto in the here and now instead of letting him fall into the wet room where the monster resides. Breathe, kid. Naruto opened his eyes, disappointment clear in them. You don't need more chakra, Naruto. You need to control what you have. And, that, we can work on. The blonde sighed. I'm already behind, sensei. No. You're not behind. Kakashi reached forward and grabbed the kid's shoulders. He instantly leaned into the touch. Let me show you some chakra control exercises, instead. You have 4 times as much chakra as I have. They need to catch up to you. He kept the kids way longer than he used to. Back then it was almost like he couldn't wait to get rid of them, to be alone. It hurt, how much he cared for them. It was too much. This time around, Kakashi wouldn't let them alone. He was going to stay around, give them the attention they deserved. When the sun was going down, Kakashi took the kids to Ichiraku. Naruto slurped happily at his ramen, then ate the other half of Sasuke's. Sakura chastised him for being sloppy but was smiling and laughing. She wasn't blushing and trying to get Sasuke to talk to her. Sasuke sat there, hands steepled under his chin, hiding a laugh at something Naruto had said. The timeline was already changing, already getting better. So far, Kakashi wasn't failing his kids. He sent a silent prayer to whatever gods were listening that his kids would continue to thrive and he wouldn't fail them. Not this time. Chapter 5, Answers, Big and Small. It took a week for Sakura to realize she needed new clothes. Her dress, although fine before, had begun to get in the way. The final straw was when she got a kunai tangled in the long fabric, ripping down the side and into her leg. Once Kakashi wrapped her leg and stopped the bleeding, Sakura stood up and used that same kunai to cut the length off her dress. The boys looked at her with shocked expressions as she stood there, feeling liberated at not wearing something her mother had pushed on her. Dresses are for young ladies to show they have a feminine side, her mother always said. You'll never find a man dressed like a typical shinobi, you need to stand out, she'd say. Her mother was wrong. You can't fight in a dress, not without worrying about needless fabric getting in the way. Kakashi had sent her to the hospital, to get her wound healed, after training. She wouldn't leave until it was over, no matter how much he begged. Instead, she toughed it out, refusing to give up. Kakashi couldn't even hide how proud of her he was. She was limping, blood trickling down her leg and coating the bandage. It was a deep cut, aching and pinching with every move. You can only handle pain so long before it overloads your senses, especially when you are not used to it. Sakura wasn't used to it. She couldn't take a hit and keep going like the boys could. It was something Kakashi had told her needed worked on. Iruka-sensei had told her that in the academy, too. She wished she would have listened. She wished she would have actually practiced. The nurse scoffed at her, mumbling about Genin always getting in trouble. The cut was too deep for a nurse to fix, she had to wait for a medic. They sat her in the waiting room, gauze in hand to handle the bleeding, while she waited. This is why she didn't want to leave training to get healed. She would have missed the rest of it. While she sat there, pain radiating down her leg, she heard a familiar voice echoing down the hallway. It made her sit up straight, craning her neck to see over the sea of people. Honestly, Koji, food isn't the only thing that matters. Ino chastised. You need to start focusing on how you look to other people. Knock it off, Ino. Shikamaru drawled from behind them, hands behind his head. He's in enough pain without you adding to it. Sakura winced when she took in the dejected look on Koji's face. Ino always was brash, speaking without thinking, always believing she was right. Koji was always so sweet to everyone, so gentle. Although the reincarnation of the fabled Ino-Shikacho combination, the team couldn't be more different. Having been in the academy with all three of them, she had vague memories of meeting their parents. Were they like this when they were Genin together? So different, so incompatible? Of course, her own team wasn't much better. Sasuke and Naruto didn't get along no matter how much teamwork Kakashi pounded in their heads. The Uchiha refused to work with anyone most of the time. Naruto didn't have social skills, so even though he wanted to work with people, he didn't know how. Granted, they'd only been a team for a week, but Sakura feared it would never get better. They would always be disjointed. Ino pulled her team into 3 open seats, right across from Sakura. She hadn't seen Sakura yet, too busy fussing over Koji and his singed hand. Shikamaru rolled his eyes, stretching as far out in the seat as he could. Looking up, and doing a double take, Ino finally noticed Sakura sitting there, pressing a pile of gauze to her, still bleeding, leg. Oh, Sakura. Ino sat upright, taking in Sakura's frazzled appearance. Sakura wondered what she looked like to her, dress cut in jagged lines, leg bleeding down into her sandals and onto the floor. Good grief, what happened to you? Sakura laughed at the shocked look on Ino's face. She gently pulled the gauze off, wincing as it stuck to the wound, to show Ino. Kunai accident. The blonde scrunched her face up. Sakura motioned to her dress. I need new clothes. Ino snorted. Yeah, I'd say. She motioned to Koji, who was gingerly holding his hand to his chest. Asuma-sensei accidentally burned Koji. He wouldn't have gotten burned had he not been concerned about his dem food. Again, the boy looked chastised. Before Shikamaru could say anything, Sakura chimed in. Akimichis need to eat, Ino. They burn through calories faster than other people. It's what makes them so strong and able to do the kind of jutsus they do. Flaunting her knowledge, especially in front of Ino, never got old. We learned about it in the academy, don't you remember? There was a stunned silence from Ino while Shikamaru just smirked. He nodded toward Sakura, a silent thank you. Koji gave her a small smile before holding out his hand, letting her see the angry red that covered it. Small blisters were forming near his thumb and index finger. It looked painful. She hissed, imagining the pain. He blows out ash and then sets it on fire. Koji explained. It's really cool to watch, when it's not heading toward you. Sakura huffed out a laugh. I've heard Kakashi-sensei is really strong. Yeah. Sakura tried to figure out how to word what her Jounin-sensei was like. He was so different from what she'd read, it was startling to her. He's not what I've read about him. Kakashi-sensei, he's really smart and is so nice to us. Patient. He was Numbu, you know? But you guys, you have Sandame's son. Shikamaru huffed. Training is still a drag. He's nice, just pushes us hard is all. Koji shrugged. Sakura giggled. Our sensei pushes us, too. Pushes you to rip your clothes. Ino crossed her arms, disbelieving. And stab yourself. The gauze, red with blood, was practically useless now. Sakura shrugged and threw it in the garbage can beside her. She reached in her pouch to pull out a piece of fabric and held it against her leg. My kunao got caught in my dress when we were sparring. It ripped clean through the dress and right into my leg. Sakura sighed, picking at her ripped clothes. After that, I just cut the rest of it off. Made sparring easier. You going shopping after this? Ino asked, motioning to the destroyed outfit. Sakura nodded. I'll come with you, if you want. Yeah, Ino, I'd like that. Naruto hung around after training, kicking his sandal against the dirt and picking up his kunao slowly. He was biding his time until Sasuke talked to Sensei and left the training field. Finally, when he saw the blue shirt disappear behind the trees, Naruto slowly made his way to Kakashi. What's going on, Naruto? Kakashi asked, giving the boy his full attention. He'd learned over the past week it was the best way to keep Naruto from jumping in his face and raising his voice. The kid just wanted noticed, acknowledged. You've been pretty quiet today. He started wringing his hands together, looking scared suddenly. Then, shaking his head, Naruto stood up straight. Never mind, Sensei, guess I'm just tired or something. He began to walk off, but Kakashi grabbed his shoulder and held him still. Naruto. Kakashi leaned down to his level. What's the matter? Do you know? I mean, Iruka-sensei knew. I figured everyone knew, but no one told me. And it said my parents put him there, but no one would ever tell me who my parents were, either. It's why people hate me, right? Naruto was wringing his hands together again, that scared look in his eye. Kakashi hated seeing it, hated seeing the fear and sadness. It was time, Kakashi knew, to give the poor kid answers. He thought about it a moment. Where would be the best place to tell him? Should he take the boy back to the Jounin's apartment? Or take him back to his own apartment, where he would probably feel safer? The training field was too open, too much of a chance of someone walking in on them. Naruto, come with me. I think it's time you understood what's going on. Where are we going? Naruto picked up his backpack, slinging it over his shoulder and jogging to catch up. Fear gave way to nerves as he looked up at his sensei. Kakashi put a hand on his shoulder, a habit he'd picked up that seemed to placate the blonde. To my apartment, where it's safer to talk. The walk there was silent. Naruto seemed to be stuck in his thoughts and Kakashi was working through how he wanted to explain it. People didn't seem to stare at the kid as much when Kakashi was with him. If anything, there were quick glances before turning back to what they were doing. There was no reason for the hate he received. Naruto was an infant, hours old when the Kyuubi was sealed inside him. He had no say in the matter, no hand in the destruction of that night. Kakashi wanted to shake these civilians, scream at them to leave the kid alone. Instead, he settled for glaring at anyone who dared glance his way. Naruto didn't know where his sensei lived, he'd never been to the part of town where the cleaner, expensive apartments are. Usually, the people here were meaner than the ones by his apartment. But, for some reason, they didn't stare as much when Kakashi was nearby. Still, Naruto kept his head down, finding it better not to look people in the eye when his emotions were on edge. Kakashi held a door open for him. He followed his Jounin-sensei up the stairs and down the hallway. There was no peeling paint on the walls, no mysterious stains or water damage or holes in the walls. It was clean and white and bright, not the dull yellow he'd grown up with. They stopped in front of a dark brown door. Kakashi let Naruto in, told him to sit down, and began a pot of tea. Hey. Kaka-sensei. Naruto dropped his bag on the floor before sitting on the chair. How long have you lived here? It's really nice. He took in the sparse surroundings. There was a picture on his windowsill. Naruto stood back up to get a better look at the image. It was a team photo. Team 7's was scheduled for the following week. This one had a man Naruto swore he'd seen before. There was a boy with goggles and a girl with marks on her face. To the side was Kakashi, small and young and a genin. He had the same disinterested look Sasuke always has. Is this your genin team? Kakashi came back over with a cup of tea, destroyed with milk and sugar, how he knew Naruto liked it. At least, how his Naruto liked it. The way this Naruto slurped it down, Kakashi guessed he'd always took it like that. I've lived here for quite a few years, actually. He smiled, sitting on the chair opposite Naruto. And, yes, that is my genin team. Minato-sensei, Uchiha Obito, Nohara Rin, and me. You had an Uchiha on your team, too. Kakashi just nodded. Was he an asshole like Sasuke? Kakashi snorted. No. I was the asshole in the team, actually. At Naruto's shocked face, Kakashi just smiled. Growing up tends to change people. Naruto stared at the picture for a few more moments before turning around, his focus on Kakashi. The kid looked deep in thought again, his eyebrows drawn together as he looked at the floor. Then, as if finally gathering his strength and courage, Naruto sat down in the chair and steeled his resolve. Did you know? About, he put his hand over the seal on his stomach, gripping the fabric there. Does everyone know? Kakashi sat his tea down and took a deep breath. Here goes everything. Yes, Naruto. I do know about the Kyuubi. I'm sorry you had to find out the way you did, that wasn't fair to you. Naruto gave a small nod, still not meeting Kakashi's eyes. I didn't know you could talk to him, however. How long has that been going on? Since our first meeting. Ah. Kakashi was suddenly gripped with fear that his interference with the timeline had messed up Naruto's seal. This was unprecedented, so who knows what would have changed. Of course, Naruto making friends with Kyuubi earlier in the timeline might not be a bad thing. And it was he who told you about your parents. Just that they put him in there. Naruto's eyes flicked up to meet Kakashi's before dropping back to his hands which were wrapped around the teacup. Why would they do that and then leave? Kakashi took a deep breath, preparing himself for the onslaught of questions his next revelation would cause. You should know, Naruto, that your parents, their names are Namikaze Minato and Uzumaki Kushina. Your father was the fourth Hokage. There was a beat while that information sunk in, then Naruto's eyes were locked on Kakashi's, his hands gripping the teacup dangerously tight. The night you were born, someone used your mother's weakness while giving birth and released the Kyuubi. The only way to stop it was to seal it away. Your parents gave their lives to protect the village, and trusted you to keep the Kyuubi sealed and to be strong enough to handle the burden. There was so much for the young boy to unpack. Kakashi was trying to give him the information in small increments so as to not overwhelm him. He did, however, reach over and remove the teacup from the boy's grip, fearing it would get shattered with more information. I have my mother's name. His voice was so small, so quiet. Kakashi nodded, setting both of their teacups down on the table. If you were given your father's name, people might have come after you. It was to protect you, but still carry on their legacy. He gave a wry smile. Besides, you're more your mother than your father. You were graced with the Uzumaki Chakra Reserve. Naruto's eyes snapped to his again. You knew them. Kakashi smiled. Your father was my Jounin sensei. He motioned to the picture Naruto looked at earlier. That's when he was younger, before he was Hokage. He was powerful and fast. The fastest ninja who ever lived, I swear. And smart. He excelled at Fuinjutsu. Kakashi paused, considering something. I wonder if you'll have a knack for it? I'll have to get you a book or scroll on it. Eyes wide, Naruto took in all the information he was getting, sucking it up like a sponge. Looking for something to grip onto, Naruto changed from the teacup to the arms of his chair. His mind was spinning, reeling from the onslaught. There was so much. He'd been hated because of something he couldn't control. He's hated even though his father was the Hokage. That didn't make any sense to him at all. But then something hit him, something Kakashi said that didn't click at first. My mother was a Jinchuriki, too. Yes. Kakashi tried to explain it to him. There was a village in Whirlpool called Uzushio. All Uzumakis came from there, including your mother. She was brought here specifically to become the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. The first Jinchuriki was Uzumaki Mito, Senju Hashirama's wife. The first Hokage. That would make you the third one to hold the Kyuubi. Are there other Uzumaki? Somewhere. Naruto sat up straight, the prospect of having a family exciting to him. Kakashi watched as his eyes sparkled, and didn't want to douse the kid's hopes. After Uzushio fell, the survivors scattered. Some changed their name, but I'm sure there are some still around somewhere. Naruto looked even more excited. You'll end up traveling a lot as a ninja. Maybe you'll come across some. He smiled, the first time Kakashi had seen it since this conversation started on the training field. Kakashi was always jealous of the way Naruto could bounce back from being sad very quickly. It was a rare skill to have, one he got from his mother. You look like your mother. Kakashi offered. Your hair and your eyes came from Minato-sensei, but the rest of you came from Kushina. Even the way you laugh. The Jounin pictured his sensei and his wife, standing side by side, Kushina glowing and pregnant. Kakashi had sworn to protect them, to protect Kushina and Naruto. He tried not to let the pain of knowing he failed sting too hard. There was a long pause while Naruto absorbed everything. His heart ached, his mind spinning, but Naruto was happy, relieved. He knew the truth now. Knowing he was the Yondame's son meant he could walk with his head held high. He wasn't the demon the village said he was. That was enough, for now. Thank you, sensei. Hiding away in his secret training area, Sasuke threw shuriken and kunai until his hands were red and sore. He was getting tired of waiting. Kakashi had promised to tell him about his brother. How long did he expect Sasuke to wait? The dull thunk of kunai hitting wood sounded all around the clearing, echoing off the trees. There was a trick his brother could do, hands full of shuriken he could flip upside down and hit every target in the Uchiha training ground, even the hidden one. It always amazed Sasuke as a young boy, watching his big brother do something as intricate as that. Steadying his feet, Sasuke gripped the shuriken the way he'd seen his brother do when he was a child. He'd been throwing those shuriken and kunai for hours, he knew where the targets are by heart. He could hit them with his eyes closed. If he broke the trick down, took it apart move by move, he could do this. A flicker jump, a flip upside down, the shuriken tossed just right, and a landing without breaking his neck. As long as he hit all of his targets, including the one he'd nailed behind the tree stump earlier, it would be just as his brother had done. The flicker jump, which always made him feel weightless and used to give him vertigo, was executed perfectly. He flipped upside down, the shuriken tucked tightly between his fingers, arms crossed over his chest. He closed his eyes, let his memory of the targets solidify in his mind. A quick flick of his wrist, and the shuriken went flying. He could hear the sounds of his shuriken hitting their targets. He counted them off, thunk, thunk thunk thunk, thunk. 5? No, he had 6 in his hands. Another flicker and he was standing on the ground. Sasuke walked to the targets, counting them off as he passed. The one behind the tree trunk was bare, the shuriken embedded in the ground about a foot away. He fumed, his hands fisted as his sides. Would he ever live up to his brother? Would he ever step out of that shadow? No matter what he does, he's always a step behind. He's never good enough. The anger rose up in him, his brother's face appearing in front of him, taunting him. The handmade targets mocking his youth and inexperience. The pock marks in the wood showing how inadequate he is. With a flurry of hand motions and a pull of chakra to his chest, Sasuke let out a huge fireball that engulfed the clearing, destroying the targets and charring the trees. He watched as leaves turned to ash, dropping to the forest floor around him. The heat from the fire barely registering through his anger. With the moon high in the sky, Sasuke ran. The dirt turned to cobblestone under his feet, his sandals pounding into the ground. If he focused hard enough, if he flared his senses as far as he could, maybe he could sense Kakashi. And, if he could sense Kakashi, he could get answers. Sasuke was done with waiting. Check the description for the links to the author.